Good evening, Dr. Feeney. This is Baylei Morel, and this is my Oregon Trail project. So this was actually the first time I've ever actually played the game. So that was a pretty interesting experience. This was a big learning experience, and it kind of did make me feel like I could really deep dive into what the settlers were going through. So the first little screen grab that I grabbed, off of the game was the map of the Oregon Trail, and I thought that it was pretty significant because it kind of really shows the whole journey that the westward settlers had to take, going from Independence, Missouri, kind of near our bottom right, all the way up to our top left, up in Oregon City, Oregon. These settlers had to go through trails that went through what is now known as Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Idaho, and of course Oregon. And the trail was roughly about 2,000 miles long, so it was not just an easy little trip for them. This was a trip that, resulted in a lot of injuries and deaths, but also a lot of good did come out of it when the end goal, when those settlers were able to get to Oregon. Um, another thing that I found pretty interesting from the history.com website was about the Oregon Donation Land Act, was really a motivation to help these travelers to journey themselves over to claim that unclaimed territory. So, kind of getting into my character of the game, I chose the profession of a carpenter, and I had a couple members of my family as my little posse to go along on this journey. When we were starting this journey, my biggest thing was, okay, well, there's going to be five of us. What's the biggest thing we need? And obviously, we're going to need ammunition. We're going to need spare parts. But I was thinking we're going to need food. And especially who's going to carry all this stuff. We definitely need some good, strong oxen to get along the way. And we started off with about $800, which is about like the medium salary then for the carpenters. In the beginning of the game, it kind of touched base that, if you would have chose the banking option, you may have started out higher, but your chances of survival weren't as good as, a farmer or the carpenter. So I kind of picked the middleman right in the middle. And for these settlers to actually, get the money to start this journey out on the Oregon Trail, they would actually, have to uproot major parts of their homes, businesses, large possessions, anything that they could to make enough money to start this journey. And then, the money that is earned goes towards things like we just discussed, with supplies for them on this long journey. And usually this was around a couple hundreds of pounds of supplies. And some supplies could include flour, sugar, bacon, coffee, salt, rifles, and ammunition. Um, and I didn't get a picture of it, but usually they were showing some good images of the carriages that the Oregon settlers were traveling in. Um, and, these wagons were usually covered and the livestock was pulling them. And, if we needed to patch things up along the way, that's why all this was kind of important. We had to make sure we had everything because we didn't know when we were going to stop again. Um, and moving on, these were our first journey. So we started on May 1st, and by May 7th, we got to the Kansas River crossing. And, it had given us an option for um, either caulking the boat or waiting for a ferry or just kind of seeing if we could make it through. And I said, well, let's try the middle option. Let's just caulk the boat and float it over. And successfully, it was able to get over there okay. But it's kind of funny because in the history.com website, when I was reading, I saw that contrary to popular belief, Conestoga wagons were not the main form of travel on the Oregon Trail. Travelers were usually using prairie schooners, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, because those wagons were a lot lighter than the traditional Conestoga wagons. Um, And continuing on, we did get to the Big Blue River crossing by May, Independence Rock by July 2nd, which was pretty cool because usually that landmark marks the halfway spot, and settlers would usually tell themselves, if we can make it by July 4th, we're doing pretty well. And, my group made it just a few days earlier. So that was pretty cool. The landmarks along the trail also served as markers then for the distance. As long as we were moving at a good pace, we could reach Oregon City in a good amount of time. However, this is usually where a lot of travesties will happen, in the sense of travelers dying from disease such as dysentery, chlorea, smallpox, or the flu. And a lot of these harsh illnesses and conditions were usually caused by inadequate drinking water. And then we were also dealing with natural disasters as well, which was very fun to say the least. But when you're traveling over those mountainous regions on the trails, you have to be careful of landslides, or events that can cause bodily harm. Um, a lot of inexperienced travelers, you know, would end up having a lot of fatigue, lack of supply, and hostile Native American attacks. So, I did want to talk to the townspeople around, and two pretty good information that I got from them was one by a Sioux brave, and the other by a trader. Then they had good information to help us kind of get over those rougher terrains, and kind of giving us good information on, hey, what to look out for. One thing that was pretty catching to me was we got robbed. They ended up stealing about 4 pounds worth of food, and at first it was like, oh, they just stole 4 pounds worth of food. But this is kind of the beginning to the end in my game, because here we have some of the illnesses that came up. My little sister had contracted measles twice. She first got measles, within the first 80 miles, so the first 4 days of us being out there. And then again in July, and then suffered a broken leg. And my boyfriend Bradley was also suffering from dysentery, chlorea, and dysentery again, which he ended up passing. Um, about about 500 miles before our actual destination. And I had chosen the path, we were at a few crossroads, and I had chosen the path to go towards Lake Walla Walla. And unfortunately, due to those very poor conditions, I as well died. I was about 300 miles away from the Oregon Trail. But usually, at first it was one of those that I felt a little disappointed that I couldn't make it to the end. But then, doing some readings, you find out that usually 1 in 10 people, or 1 in 10 travelers don't actually make it through the Oregon Trail. So I am one in the 10. These these journeys and everything that these settlers had to go through, dealing with fatigue, lack of supplies, hostile indigenous peoples attacks due to the indigenous people losing their land, and things like graves and ruins and messages were also marked throughout the trail, mine being my tombstone here in this sense. But sometimes these messages would be used to actually caution travelers of the conditions of the trails up ahead, letting them know if there's going to be disease, hostile or dangerous environments, or even bad water, which was a major thing for your animals. Overall, the experience was very, very interesting, to say the least. I think that if I had been back in those times with the Oregon Trail, I do not believe that I would be surviving. I would probably say I'd camp out around Soda Springs or Independence Rock, and be pretty happy with what I got. But thank you so much for listening, and have a good evening.